Mark Woodhouse here from Proaxiom Cyber. I've got Cameron Fairbairn here with me today, and we're going to have a quick deep dive into the 23-24
Shallow dive.
A nose dive, if you will, into the ASD Australian Signals Directorate Cyber Threat Report for 23-24. Really appreciate the effort that goes into pulling this data together for us to analyze. And with that, Cam, I'll hand over to you to run through some key findings.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Let's go through the report. This is for anyone who doesn't have much time to consume the whole thing. We'll just get to it really quickly. So some of the key themes here in the report are that Australia's in a very complex strategic environment due to geopolitical instability. So, of course, we're talking about the war in Ukraine, but we're also talking about military tensions increasing between North Korea, South Korea. We're talking about military tension between the Chinese mainland and Taiwan. And so, the ongoing geopolitical situation in the South China Sea in general, and that being, relatively close to Australia, having a really kind of strong impact on how the threat landscape has come together in this last reporting period. Pretty significant change in terms of technological advancements for nation state actors and for regular non-nation state actors as well. And I think probably important to know about this increasingly dotted line relationship between nation state actors and regular kind of ransomware crews and other APTs. So really kind of interesting landscape in the last reporting period. Some numbers. So the ASD's hotline got 37,000 calls this reporting period. That's a 12% increase from the previous year. Around 1.1 thousand security incidents, which is a similar volume to the last reporting period, and 87,500 cybercrime reports. So an increase in hotline calls, which means that there's more perhaps threat actor activity, but things that maybe have been dealt with and nipped in the bud as opposed to turning into a full-blown security incident, but still pretty significant numbers there again.
I think it's probably worth mentioning there too, Cam. I think according to the report, there was almost 50% of the reported incidences came from federal, state, and local government organisations. So those statistics there are only as good as the reporting, right? There's probably a lot more activity that has gone unreported, which would skew those numbers to the right even further.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there's, underreporting is something that we need to be aware of. These numbers are really just what was reported. We know from direct experience with affected customers who've been impacted by real world threat actor activity in a pretty significant way that they have a reticence to report due to the reputational damage of being attacked successfully. So the numbers definitely skew up when you consider that factor. So there's a lot more, what comes along with nation state level activity is an increase in espionage activity. This is SolarWinds or, type, espionage, in that we're now, seeing a lot more nation state actors who are staying resident in the network and gathering data and pre-positioning for potential disruptive cyber attacks. So looking at that dwell time, and another really important consideration is this pivot towards living off the land, using binaries that are already on the system, not downloading your own tools as a threat actor, because that is more likely to cause detection. And this is likely in response to the increased use of EDR technology and the increased uptake of managed detection and response services. Interestingly, the critical infrastructure landscape made up 11% of all attacks in this reporting period, with electricity, water, education, and transport most frequently attacked. So that means that our education industry customers are actually starting to move up that that list. The attack vectors, unsurprisingly, phishing still making up almost a quarter of the attack vector pie. Exploitation of public-facing applications at 21% and brute force attacks at 15%. So those are interesting numbers in this reporting period. Still a lot of exploitation of public-facing applications. So that's something that customers clearly struggling with, not really getting their external attack surface managed. I guess the compromised account or credential making up the smallest piece of the pie there. You've got compromised assets as the second, and it's compromised assets as the smallest, and then compromised account being the largest subset of attacks. So this really points to a significant problem with managing your identities. And so, customers really need to focus on impersonation resistant multi-factor authentication capabilities and centralizing identity on, IDPs that make sense for your organization, like Entra ID, Okta, that kind of thing.
Be a good case for least privileged account as well, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So just in time elevation of privileges, privilege management, and technologies like Microsoft's privileged identity management really being very effective ways to mitigate these threats. An increase, not surprisingly, of AI in cybercrime. The report specifically points out a lot of incidents that were triggered by a phishing email that was particularly sophisticated. So it's now quite easy for threat actors, particularly non-English speaking threat actors, to knock together a very realistic looking phishing email, and an increase in the use of video and other AI technologies in the incidents. Ransomware, some trends, interesting trends where exfiltration becomes the primary objective of the ransomware affiliate. So they're more likely now to just demonstrate that they've extracted your data rather than actually encrypting it. I think that's probably in response to a lot of organizations developing more sophisticated mitigations for the conventional ransomware attacks. So this is more about ransoming the fact that they've stolen some private identifiable information from your clients or something along those lines. I think in this last reporting period, important to note that there's been sanctions imposed, particularly on Russia, by the Australian government, and a lot of operations to dismantle existing ransomware infrastructure, with some affiliates going down completely. I think it's important to note, though, that there will be a reorganization of ransomware crews, and the same old faces will appear in different guises, and this is something that we were expecting.
Probably with the US election being overturned, will free up some resources within the crews to resume normal activity.
I would think so. And something that you pointed out earlier that I think is really worthy of note is that although Ukraine is a state that or a nation that we are offering support to in the West, it's still important to understand that a lot of threat actor activity still comes out of that country. So yeah, it's an important thing to keep in mind. The ASD conducted a lot of operations this year, so a lot of blocked malicious domains, 189,000 domains removed. So this is an important activity because so much threat actor activity relies on DNS resolution of domains, and so taking those down is a really important factor in reducing that threat actor activity. Of course, the ASD continues its CTIS program, of which we're a member, and shares threat intelligence, particularly through their Sentinel-based solution. And they're generating a lot more threat intelligence in this last reporting period. And then they've got cyber resilience programs running. Of particular note would be the updated ASD Essential 8 maturity model from 2022, which is takes the existing ASD Essential 8 and gives it a much needed facelift. The recommendations that they're making in the report are for organizations to adopt more proactive measures. So this really means the introduction of controls, secure by design products, the introduction of security frameworks like ISO 27001, NIST Cybersecurity Framework, the ASD Essential 8. And increasingly, we're seeing a lot more interest from organizations around the SMB 1001 standard. Incident preparedness, so making sure that you do have a cyber incident response plan, that you know what that plan looks like, that you understand what the communication channels are during a cybersecurity incident, that kind of thing. Of course, building a capability in one of the cybersecurity frameworks like ISO 27001 or SMB 1001, for example, is going to necessitate having an incident response plan. So an important component there. And collaborating with the ASD's Cybersecurity Partnership Program. So making sure that you understand what role as an organization the ASD can play in the cybersecurity posture of your organization, and partnering with companies like Proaxiom, who are ASD partners themselves, to assist with uplifting your cybersecurity posture.
I think that second point there too, Cam, is a very valid one, as far as when we're having conversations with customers. Often use the phrase, you want to understand where the exits are when you're in a room filled with smoke, right? So when you're in a smoke-filled room, you already want to know where the exits are, and that's why you should be testing your response plan, right? And making sure you've tabletopped it, you step through it, even up to the CEO, who's going to be potentially having to make a publicly facing statement around things. Yeah, you'd like to have that dry run first, so that if you ever need it.
It's and that's something that's really important. Tabletop exercises that involve the executive team don't happen enough, and I think that preparedness, as you said, with the executive team, having gone through a number of actual real life threat actor incidents for organizations that were very impacted by like a ransomware group, for example. You're right. The day that happens, you don't want that to be the day that you open the incident response plan for the first time in 3 years and blow the dust off it and decide, okay, under this extremely stressful circumstance, I'm going to read this thing and try to figure it out. You want to have some pretty good kind of understanding of what you're going to do on that day. So really important stuff there. So I guess the conclusion here out of the report is that there are significantly evolving threats in cybersecurity. I think the thing I'd like people to take away the most is that because of geopolitical instability, we're seeing a lot more involvement, both directly and indirectly, of nation-state actors, that there is that dotted line affiliation between nation-state actors and organizations like ransomware crews. And that probably means that in the future, we're going to see a lot more nation-state level capability attacks. And so organizations need to bump up their cybersecurity. So for example, if you're looking at adversary-oriented framework like ASD Essential 8, look at level 3 instead of level 2, because nation-state actor activity is on the increase. The last reporting period was I guess, very focused from the ASD's perspective on collaboration and making sure that there's these awesome public and private partnerships that are crucial for cyber defense, and that the ASD's partnership program is something that most organizations should by now be aware of, and that organizations need to adopt best practices to increase their overall resistance, and that looks like using frameworks like ISO 27001, ASD Essential 8, NIST Cybersecurity Framework to increase their posture. So I think a great report. And as you pointed out earlier, really fantastic that we've got such a great federal level organization who's reporting this data for us so that we can use it for real world changes to how we behave in the context of the cyber security threat landscape.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we'll do a bit more of a deep dive on this, go through some of the numbers in a bit more detail in a separate session. If you've got any questions or if you would like us to go through a particular topic, then please let us know in the comments. We will certainly be happy to pick up any burning topics or address any questions that people might have. For now, though, we'll wrap it up. Thanks, Cam. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Talk to
All
you.
right, cheers. See you next
Talk to you
time.
soon.
Bye.